Now, during the engagement, we noticed that there are a couple of Nigel Christian bullies who came into the meeting. One of them, Ken Strawn, and a couple family members of Nigel Christian. The family members came in with their protest shirts, so they didn't come there to the meeting with clean hands. In fact, they were not mourning as how some people would have suggested. They came there literally like Django's, ready to insult and to. So I was saying that they came there like Django's, ready to fight us. So even before we spoke, they were lambasting us on social media. You can look at one of the pages on social media on the, what is it now, Topaz Christian, I think, saying all kind of mean things about us. So you can see that they came there to create mischief. So I want to make it abundantly clear there was nothing innocent about Strawn's intervention. In fact, Strawn and others have been literally UPP activists for the last 2 years, and they have tried to use this Nigel Christian situation as a cause celeb and to use it as a political tool to undermine the Labour Party and certainly to undermine me as its leader. So you would know, for example, that for the last 2 years, they've been trying to prejudice the thinking of the people using this rhetoric that the forging of my signature involving some customs warrants, which I announced publicly about 2 years ago, that is associated with Nigel's death. Now they're talking about influencing the process. The fact that they would have started and continued to promote that, that argument. Who is really trying to influence the process here? Whereas I spoke, I never really said anything directly about the case, and I will not. And let me make the point here too that this matter is sub judice. And if there's anyone who wants to call and engage in this subject, clearly will not have any discussions about it.
Agree.
But I believe I can speak in generalities about it, which is what I did at the town hall meeting. And let me make the point here too that I do not have any information that is not already in the hands of law enforcement. So what I have is what is already known. You would know that just a few days ago, the case was remitted to the High Court. A magistrate determined that there was sufficient evidence. From the article I read in the Observer, they said that they have forensic evidence, they have cell phone evidence, enough to bring the individuals to justice. But again, the system is such that they're deemed to be innocent until proven guilty. But a magistrate has determined that there is sufficient evidence against the 3 individuals who are incarcerated for them to answer at the level of the High Court. So we will not speak to the case. Obviously, we can't.
I agree.
But I would have, decided to deal with Ken Strawn frontally because he is one of them who kept promoting this notion about my signature is associated with Nigel Christian's death. So, for example, no matter what the subject is, it's always about who forged the Prime Minister's signature. Justice for Nigel Christian. But guess what? They've had 2 years of latitude. But when you come and you stand up in front of me and you want to bring that kind of argument with me, you're going to get a spanking. And that is exactly what he got at the town hall. He got a spanking. And then I asked him to have a seat. So now that he and his UPP masters are in a fit, as I'm concerned, I'm amused because they've had 2 years of puppy showing themselves. You recall at one point too, they had big picketing the Governor General's office because they wanted to have an inquiry into a public inquiry. Here's a situation with police, law enforcement doing the work. And they want on top of that to have a public inquiry because they believe that there's political involvement. Now, what is that? And then, look, I know that our politics in this country can be very personal and hostile. But at the same time, when it comes to laying at the feet of someone, especially an innocent person, a case of murder, that is just inappropriate. And that is precisely where they went. That is where Harold Lovell and DJL Isaac, all of them went, trying to suggest that they're members in the Labour Party, higher up in the government, according to them, who may have been involved. And, differently. The interesting thing is, when Nigel Christian went missing, I believe that I may have been the first person that a sister called, Carla Baptist. She called me, and, I sympathized with her and so on, and gave her, commitment. We'll do all we can to find him. Then, it was probably about an hour or so after she called back and said that apparently he was, executed. And, I did all I could to comfort her. I mean, I also would have assured her that we would not leave any stone unturned. It is the first case, I believe, in the history of the country in which we invited both Scotland Yard as well as the FBI to assist us. And the FBI did give us a significant amount of assistance. And that is why we're able to get sufficient evidence to the extent that we now have 3 individuals who are faced with the charge of murder. So there's no evidence that my government tried to sweep anything under the table or the carpet, as how they put it. There's no evidence that we did anything to frustrate the case. There's no evidence that there's anyone in my government who's connected to it. In fact, there's no evidence that anybody in my government even knows anyone knows the perpetrators. But, this is how ridiculous the politics has gotten in Antigua. And I'll say to that, I believe that Nigel's sisters in particular, who continue to push this issue, that they've gotten carried away, jumped on this UPP bandwagon, and have not maybe stopped to think about the consequences of the things that they're saying. You cannot be, by any end, you're accusing people of killing your brother when you have no evidence to that effect. And the fact, too, I mean, the family and I have been very good friends. In fact, Carl and I have been pretty close for years. And, I take serious objection to any possibility of she and others trying to, by way of innuendo, suggesting that I could have had some form of involvement. And that is just horrendous. And I think I have a right to speak openly about this issue. I'm not trying the case. I'm just speaking about the politics surrounding the case. And I can't, especially going into an election cycle, allow them to get away with these cheap shots. Because they have some very fickle-minded people out there who may stop and probably think, boy, maybe the Prime Minister is involved. Reality is, I have never hurt anybody in this country. I've never even fired a single person. I believe I may go down as the only Prime Minister that never fired a person or caused a person to be fired. So if I'm not putting people out of work, how am I going to involve in heinous crimes like that directly or indirectly? And again, it's the first time in 2 years that I would have chosen to address it, because the gentleman stood in my presence and I knew exactly where he was going. And trust me, I shut him up and I asked him to sit down, manners him, and I make no apologies about it.
All right.
And by the way,
yes,
I made a point here, which I'm going to repeat again. And this is generally speaking. I'm not calling anybody a crook. But what I do know for sure, and I think this is what maybe hurt them more than anything else. And I stand by what I say, no matter what they say, how reprehensible it is, I know what is reprehensible. And at the end of the day, they can judge me all they want, but I know who I am. But the point I'm making here is that criminals seldom retaliate to the actions of law enforcement unless there are relations that go beyond the professional nature of the officer's work.
Okay. Prime Minister.
Instead of they don't know anything, I will go no further. But if that is what is hurting them, I'm going to repeat it, because I stand by that. And let us not forget to, this is not the first time that a customs officer got brutally murdered. And let me also make the point here too, that no matter how corrupt, and I'm not saying that Nigel was, but no matter how corrupt he may have been, there is no justification for anybody to take his life. But let us not forget that Dolly House, the comptroller of customs, was brutally murdered years ago. And at that time, no one tried to link it to any politician or to play any cheap politics and to fabricate stories about, politicians potentially could have been involved. So I'm saying that they have taken this thing too far, too low. And I certainly knew exactly where they were going. And I made sure that I managed strong. And I said to him, go sit down.